Hi again. Let's talk about how you can filter attributes and values using JavaScript. So I have a fork in here of the notebook that I was just working on for cross filter. And then what I'm going to be doing in there is doing some D3, although probably I'm not going to even need D3. And then just loading a data set, in this case, the FIFA data set. So let's use Navio for summarizing how this data looks like. So as you know, you just need to import it from my notebook. And then once you have done that, then of course, like do not use for quotes, like double quotes is already big. So do not use double quotes. And then if you say here it's my old data set, like the whole data, then you can see that this is a data set that contains a lot of rows, as you can see here, and then like 18,000 records. So let's say that, for instance, you want to create a copy of this. And by the way, so yeah, let's say that you want to create a copy of this that maybe has less rows or attributes. So let's start by filtering attributes. So when you want to do that, you have seen me doing that all the time, but to work on that more specifically, like JavaScript has its own function called filter, and it's a function out of arrays. You can use it on any array. And basically what you need to pass in here is a specific attribute that that says how you want to filter. Like for instance, let's say that you only want to see, like if you see in here, for instance, only the goalkeepers in your data set. So you can say something like, I want to see only the positions goalkeepers. And then after doing that, this is going to return a copy of your data. And as you can see, it has like 2,000 rows that probably it's going to be about the same. If I come in here and then I search for goalkeepers, is the same thing that I'm doing in here, exactly 2025, as you can see. So this function is quite useful. Like for instance, in here, you're going to see, like when you open this on Navio, you're going to see that there's a lot of them that have null values in certain attributes. Like when you sort, for instance, by these elements in here, then you start noticing that some of them have like null values for certain things. So for instance, I think this release clause in here that I think it's money related, it's also null. So basically what you can find things that are null, that have null values using something like that. So you can say, for instance, d dot the function d of release. And notice that I'm using square brackets in here, and that's because release clause has a space on it. So if this thing it's undefined, then you can get like all of the elements that have that, and then of course it will not return anything. I wonder if it is like this, or let's return this one. Oh, it actually did it that way. So basically what that's saying is, show me all the values that have this as a true value. So as you see in there, it's returning like all of the other ones that don't have a negative value in there. And then if you do this one, like for instance, I can see what are going to be the interesting James Rodriguez, the Colombian soccer player. It's one of the ones that seems to not have a release clause. So yes, it's null. So like depending on how you want to filter that, like you have to be careful with this one in here, because if someone has a 0 value in here, it's also going to trigger that. So that is how you filter with JavaScript rows. The other thing that you can do is that you can actually create more complex things. Like for instance, I want to see, like building on this one that we had before, let's say that maybe you want to see like the best, I want to see the best goalkeepers that are there. So maybe I want to filter also, like you can put like nested operations. Like I want to see anything that has a value of overall score of more than 7, that of 80 or 85. Like these are the top 10 goalies in this data set. And as you can see, if you know any about soccer, anything about soccer, then you can understand that there are actually quite good, the people that are in there. It's quite interesting that Buffon is in there when he was 40. That's cool. So that is how you filter, and this is not attribute, this is how you filter values. Sorry about that. So now let's see how you filter attributes. Attributes are a little bit harder to filter, but it's also possible in here. It's just a matter of understanding JavaScript well. So in this case, it's filtering attributes. And then when you want to do that, there are multiple ways of doing it, but the easiest way is that you take your data, and then instead of using filter, what you use is map. And then what you do in here is that you can create a new object. So in this case, it will be a new object, and then you specify in there, like, what are the attributes that you want to filter on. Like, for instance, let's say that you want to use the position. And then, so we are creating a new object, so I have to say what is the value of this. In this case, it's going to be d.position. And then let's say that you also want the overall, and then you get d.over. This is actually convenient if you know how to close your parentheses. This is going to be convenient for you to, did I get the same number of elements? Yes, I did, 18,000. So this is going to be convenient for you to create a copy of your data as well, because basically what you're doing in here is that you're creating new objects. And for instance, one of the things that happens when you load things with Navio is that Navio, for saving space, will modify your data structure, and it will add secondary information, like if it is visible or not, that is like selected in here, and also the sequential ID that you see here. So with this, you can actually create like a shallow copy. So this is one way of doing that. If you want to use, like, let's say you want something more generic and you don't want to have to write all of that, there's also ways of doing that. Let's say, for instance, that I want to create like a full copy of my element. So let's say in here that I'm going to use, like, just because I'm lazy, I'm going to get all the possible attributes like this. And then actually, let's do a selectable one. So I'm going to say that I'm going to use checkbox from Ashkenaz/inputs. And then from that, then what I'm going to say, it's like view of selected attributes. It's going to be checkbox of attributes. And then now you have a selector that lets you choose all of the possible attributes. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do the same thing in here, like the copy. And then, like, let's say data copy, because that sounds like just an element. And then what we are going to do is exactly the same thing. I'm just going to create a copy. But since I don't want to have to write, I don't even know which ones are the ones that are going to get in there. But I do know that I can do this. And this is going to be a list. So I can actually do also a map of this. And then what this is going to say, this is going to be my attribute. Then what I could do is I could just return, like, for instance, what is the specific attribute. Like, let's say that I'm just going to return the element. And then what I could do is that if I do something like this, like to start seeing what we are going to be getting, I want to return the object. So I actually need to put this in parentheses, since you see in here. So let's get rid of this and selected. Oh yes, so I need to say, so for the moment, let's say that I'm going to put here as a list, because that's an object, so I need an attribute. So now basically what I did is that everything that I have selected is going to appear in here as the element. Okay, so let's actually build these on steps so it can be a little bit more understandable. So let's first the other one. So let's return this, and then what I can do is that I can take this thing, and then I can say that I'm going to create like attributes tuples, or whatever I want to call it. And then instead of doing this, I'm going to return A and then D of A. So now basically what I'm going to get in there, it's a tuple of like a combination of the element, like the attribute, and then the value of that attribute. Like you can see that in here. That one will not show it because this is inside a map. So for the moment, let's leave it like this. So if I put it in here, maybe you can see it. So now you can see that I will have like the attribute and then the value. So the beauty of this is that if you have a data structure like this, then you can create a new object. I think you can say to do something like this, hopefully, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then, of course, object from is not function, so it might be something like new object, possible to be like this. Not I'm forgetting something in the syntax. What could be my error? Like from entries. I think this is the one I want. Yes. So from entries, we'll take this one that it's supposed to have like the attribute and then the value, and it will build an object out of that. So to explain that better, like if you say something like this, from entries, and then you pass in there like something like a comma 1, then and this has to be a nested function, then it's going to get that one. If you put in here another tuple and say b should have John, then it will have an object with that. So that's what I'm taking advantage of. And actually I was looking for this for a while, and then now you can see that if I keep on adding elements, then basically it's creating a copy of your data set that uses those elements. And then if you want to filter that, then you can use the ones that I used before. So that's how you filter attributes and values on JavaScript, as you have seen in the rest of the course, but now to see it like in a more specific way. Now, like as a final note, I recommend you when you're doing filtering, like now that you saw the cross-filter demo, cross-filter is way faster for doing the filtering, especially when you want to apply that multiple columns. So consider using that if you're building something bigger. Okay, thank you very much.